Yeah, I want to thank everyone for making this happen. This was kind of a roundabout way trip. I was speaking in 4 other places, and he asked me to, and I've read so much research about this facility over the years. I said, for sure I'm going to be there, whatever it takes. And so we moved a little heaven and earth, and we got here. So I think it's great, and I love what you're doing here and representing. So how do I control the clicker with the mouse, or do I just click here? Oh, great. All right. So what I really want to share with you, I'm not really used to being trapped behind a lectern. So part of what it is in my history, just so you understand my background, my dad was a very gifted alcoholic, which means he could everything could be going just perfect, and he would decide to go out, get drunk, and I had an upbringing that probably isn't significant for most people, but in my case, I think I'm blessed to be the son of an alcoholic, because he taught me. He went out and learned how to meditate, which in India, you hopefully were brought up doing that. If not, then hopefully you'll learn something today that you need to start doing it. Because meditation is the key to really getting results in your life. My problem was that being a very overactive kid, and I was very negative. I went to Catholic school, so I actually attended 2nd grade twice, and so it's unusual that I would have 2 PhDs now. But my dad taught me through meditation that you could activate your brain. So I'm going to teach you just a little bit about that. We only have an hour today, right now, right? And then we're going to have this afternoon. If you come to the afternoon class, we're actually going to demonstrate, which means you'll be able to see with this heart rate variability system that I'm going to leave with you what happens physiologically to the body. Because a lot of people think this is something invisible. They think nothing's happening. They're just taking a nap. But you can tell now through your physiology all the dynamic changes that are happening in the body and how it builds over time. It's not just a one-time and nothing. But why do we need this is the key today. Let me see if I get this right. Yeah, there we go. So first of all, we believe that stress hijacks the nervous system. You probably will agree that if you're under stress, you're not going to perform as well as when you're not under stress. So what I like to do is do a little example. Everybody stand up for me. And while you're standing, what I want you to do is balance on one foot and do a circle in the air with the other, just like this. So while you're doing that, go ahead and write your name in the air. Just a little game, see what happens. Okay. All right, hear that laughter? Go ahead and sit down. We got what we needed. That laughter actually represents a neurological storm, which means that your nervous system at that moment is trying to decide, should I have my right brain active or my left brain active? And what happened was, if you were the one that found that you were writing your name and then your circle went analog like this, you're probably more left brain, which means half of your computing power, your creative power, just shut down. So that means under stress, you're probably not that great at making decisions. Now, on the other hand, if you found that you're doing your circle and you've written your name thousands of times but couldn't remember how to write your name, you're the person that really needs meditation the most. Because during a testing situation, when you get under stress, all that knowledge, all the books you've read, all the classes you've attended, all that information, you know it, but during that test it's not available to you. Because the brain doesn't, when you think a thought or you remember something, it occupies 6 or more spaces or places in your brain. So it's not just one place. Little bits over on the right side, little bits over on the left, little bits in the frontal lobe, all these different places. And under stress, your nervous system, that neuromodulation, isn't functioning because nobody trained you to do it. Now, there's a few things that train you to do it, and you do them in India all the time. Number 1 is yoga. So if you were to come to any of our clinics in America, we have 2,000 clinics doing what we do, what I'm speaking about. We would tell them either do yoga, Tai Chi, or learn to ballroom dance. So you decide which one. Because our bodies are designed to move and breathe. And there's a saying in yoga that says you're only as young as your spine is flexible. And the reason for that is your spine is the keyboard to the brain. But stress comes through the body. So a lot of times what happens to the body here is stress will reach its weakest point. Pain, a lot of people think pain happens in the body. We experience it in the body, but our brain processes it. And it only happens in one brainwave. That brainwave is called beta. So if you're not in beta, that's why you can put people under anesthetics and you perform surgery, they don't feel it because that brainwave isn't active. They're in theta maybe or even delta at that point. So in those brainwave states, your brain isn't experiencing pain even though your body might be being cut by a surgeon. But your body doesn't know the difference between being cut by a surgeon or being stabbed by a thief. So our brain interprets that information. So what we want to do is we want to have a way to train the brain to overcome pain and desensitize it to discomfort under stress. Now, also, science has proven today that when you change your stress level, like when you're stressed out, you start meditating, you start relaxing, you actually are changing 7 generations. There's a book called Biology of Belief written by Dr. Bruce Lipton, and I recommend it to everyone. And he kind of started this thing called epigenetics back about 40 years ago. And he showed that your genes don't know what to do until they're exposed to an environment. So a lot of people think you are the sum total of your mom and dad. That's not true. You're the only 20% the sum total of your mom and dad. 80% has to do with the books you read, the people you hang out with, the activities you take part in, the food you consume. All of those things turn on and off our gene expression. So we can control, in other words, who we are, our gene expression. Part of that is, some of you might know families, maybe none of you in here, but some of you might know that families have a history of stress. Or they go, we have a history of depression in our family. We have a history of whatever it is. The reality is there is no history. It's just basically these genes being expressed because we've learned from our parents. We don't have to be dictated by what our parents did. And we can change that today. And science is proving, what we do today is science is proving out everything actually that you've been doing in India for 10,000 years or 5,000 years or however long you've had your books of your sacred text. So we're going to talk a little bit about light, because light is very important. Like we lit the candle here, but light is very important. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, because a lot of people know about meditation, but they don't know about light. Back when I started out with a company called Light and Sound Research, we started researching how could we train the brain of a person who was highly stressed because biofeedback didn't work. This is in the 80s. There was no neurofeedback. When we're measuring brain waves, we have to use the little, we have to put the little probes on the head and get the electrical activity. They didn't have that back then, but we did have biofeedback. So what we found out was we could teach people to relax by looking at a candle. Most of you have probably seen somebody meditating in front of a candle, and there's a science behind that. Now, they don't explain what that is, but a candle flickers at 10 hertz frequency, which is alpha. Our bodies, through biofeedback, we always are engaging our body with our environment. So while we're looking at the candle, it's flickering at 10 hertz frequency. Our brain responds to that. The science is called frequency following response. And then if we breathe and we just make the candle kind of flicker, now we're getting that breathing ratio down. The problem is not everybody can focus and concentrate that long to get that to happen. So we said, how can we do that? Luckily, in 1986, the LED chip came out, the microprocessor, and we could program light-emitting diodes to act like a candle. So we're really imitating nature, what people have always done. So we do that with light. Now, sound is really important. In India, you have your chants, you have drum circles, you have all these different ways in which we're using sound. We know that sound can alter a person's mood. In fact, they know, the Russians have probably done more research than anyone, but they actually showed that if you listen to Baroque classical music while you study, and this is for all the students in the room, you actually will increase your hypermnesia, which means super memory, because you're an alpha. So if you listen to that kind of music, no drums, just that kind of Baroque classical music, you will train your brain, because in that brainwave state, you have a better opportunity to take short-term memories and make them long-term memories. So it helps with your memory system. So we're going to use sound. I'm going to explain a few different ways we use sound to do that. And then we're going to use vibration. There is a place in your ancient script, actually, that talks about these 3 technologies. I just learned about it at the last conference. I've got to get the language down a little bit. But everything in our known universe is occupying light, sound, and vibration. Everything. They can measure the frequency of your kidneys, your gallbladder, your heart, whatever, because it has a resonant frequency. You personally, everyone in this audience, has a resonant frequency. When we all come together, we have a resonant frequency. If you go onto YouTube and you look up metronomes, that's if you've ever learned to play the piano, it's the little thing goes tick, tick, back and forth. If we set 50 metronomes on this dais and we walked away, in 3 minutes, if nobody messed with those metronomes, they would all be synchronized. That happens in all groups. So like in this group, Part of our unifying was lighting this candle. Everyone here has a memory of that. We focused on it. Our brainwaves start to associate with it. We all become in sync with that. Some people do it through chanting or prayer, other things like that. But it's a vibration. That vibration, when you walk in, we all have a friend, or maybe they're not a friend, but when they show up, you're going, oh no. We call them energy vampires. They're the person that they walk in and all the energy in the room, like the light gets a little bit lighter, the darker in the room when they walk in. There are people like that. And there are other people that walk in the room and it becomes a little bit brighter. Everybody goes, oh, hey, Varun's here, all right. You're all happy, smiling. All these things happen. So you want to be the light bright. You want to be the bright light, not the one that dims the light, right? This happens because we bring a frequency with us. In fact, each of you, your heart, they now know that your heart has 40,000 neurocells. 40,000 that's not very many, but those neural cells actually send twice the information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. That's why a lot of heart-centered meditations, people focusing on their heart. And in America, I don't know if it's true in India, but I'm sure you're catching up. Monday morning, there's more heart attacks than any other day of the week because their heart's not in it. They're not in their job, they're not in their relationship, they're not, whatever it is. So you need to find something that you're passionate about that you actually can put your heart in. But the key here is that we can measure from your heart. If we get your heart in coherence, which means the heart brain is talking to the physical brain, then it talks to another brain called the gut brain. You have 5 times the neurotransmitter production in your gut than you do in your brain, or more. So when your brain tells your gut to make the neurotransmitter, if your gut's off, and right now today the biggest reason people miss work anywhere in the world is irritable bowel syndrome. They might call it an upset stomach, or, they don't feel right, they didn't eat well last night or whatever. But that's a mental problem, not a physical problem. In most places in the world, they'll send them to a hypnotherapist before they'll give them medicine. Because it's a thinking problem. You have 500 million neural connections in your gut. So think about that. You have a billion in your brain. So all these 3 have to work together. So how do you do that? How do you modulate that? How do you get that neuromodulation going? The best way is through breathing, relaxing, and visualizing. Now, we call this meditation, if you're doing the right way. So what does neuroscience have to do with it? I'm not going to read through all of these, but the Neuroscience Bulletin shows light therapy has advantages over antidepressant drugs. First of all, it's low cost. It's not going to cost anything. There's minimal side effects. The worst thing that can happen is you get a good nap. Somebody asked me, what can you do? Well, you either get a good nap or you get a change. You're not going to have to worry about them getting addicted. Although some people have asked me, is light and sound addictive? I said, I don't know. I've been doing it since 1986. So it's one of those things like brushing your teeth. If you want to keep your teeth cleaned, if you want to keep your brain working, you're going to meditate. You're going to figure out how to do these things. So it's fast. One of the things that we're going to do, and I'm going to show you through how we do it, is just like you were talking about when you clap, all those acupuncture points, you also have them in your ears. Right? You have them all over your body. Your body is holographic in nature. It keeps repeating itself over and over again. So what we did is we put lights in the ears to use photobiomodulation. When that light enters into at a certain frequency, remember we're using light, sound, and vibration, we put 197 hertz frequency. There's a Dr. Noget who created iridology. Or he rediscovered it, I should say, because you've had it here for a long time. But what he showed was if you put a sound frequency into the body responds or mirrors that sound frequency. This happens to be the frequency the body loves to hear to turn off sympathetic overload and turn on parasympathetics. Healing only happens in parasympathetics. That means when your patient gets woke up every 2 hours to get checked, you took them out of parasympathetics, and put them into the fight or flight. When you're in fight or flight, you don't digest your foods, you don't metabolize your medicine, all these things are happening. So some way we need to get our patients relaxed so that their body can assimilate. We have one group in America that does addiction therapy, and they do an IV drip with amino acids for the brain. And they found out that they got 30% more absorption when they used the brain tap because the people were in parasympathetics. If not, think of when you're in sympathetics, all this area of the body, right? If your body doesn't know the difference between being chased by a tiger or the stress of an illness. So the digestive system shuts down. We want to get the body relaxed. And sometimes it's just as simple as teaching them to do some breathing exercises, teaching them to relax to some music. We put it all together into the brain tap, but there's other ways to do it that are just as effective if they'll do them. So neuroscience, if you look up the research, one of the nice things in Varun, Dr. Varun saw him, our chief medical officer was at the one conference over in Delhi, and he spoke about photobiomodulation. He actually did most of the research on photobiomodulation in the brain and concussions. That's why I hired him, because he has all the research on how it works. And you'd be amazed at what the brain can do if fed light, sound, and vibration. You can heal the brain at any age, and we've proven that. There's a book called Saving Your Brain, and it's one of our doctors, and he did all the research on women 50 to 65 years old. And he wanted to know what would happen if they experienced this light, sound, and vibration system for 6 weeks. Well, with a product called the New Mind, we can actually measure neuroplasticity, which means we can measure the neuron connections in the brain. Then, before and after, we got 64% neuroplasticity in 6 weeks. What that equates to is getting a faster computer. Okay, so you have this old computer, you get an upgrade. The more processing speed. And what we found out was, as we get older, unfortunately, what happens to some of you can't identify with this yet because you're still young. When you turn about 28, you start to realize you're going to expire at some point. But until then, you're immortal. So what happens is the left brain starts to slow down before the right brain. This causes some really big problems like dementia, Alzheimer's, because these two brains also have to communicate all the time. So we can actually speed up one brain faster than the other and get them to reconnect, and that's what we're talking about. Once that happened, these women who are all on the spectrum for dementia are no longer on the spectrum, as long as they do it every other day or every 72 hours. What we found in our research was every 72 hours your nervous system is going to reset itself or recalibrate. So we want to change that. Now this is one study we did with the heart rate variability system that we're going to leave with you. You can play with it. Anybody who gets with wherever you're going to put it here in the university, we can have them do it. But what we did here is we took a sample size of 100 people, 50 women, 50 men, and we had them experience just one 20-minute session. Because people want to know, right now in America anyway, people want it fast, they want it free, they want like a limo to go pick them up to get their treatment. You know, they want everything. So they don't want to wait around for change. But change happens over time. But we want to see what would happen in one session. So what we found out here was in one session, and I'll just kind of summarize this for you. In one session, we were able to get, and we can get you the full results too to share. In one session, we got a 27.5% neurological shift in all markers that you calibrate or evaluate in HRV. That's just with one session. What we followed up on this study, and we said, what happens after 30 days? If the person was to do 3 sessions a week for 30 days, their new baseline was either better than or at their post-evaluation. When we did this test at our last event in Delhi, we couldn't use Varun, he was too good. You know, he's like an A student, his brain was operating way up here, so we asked for another volunteer, and we got the change that we needed. You know, but it can be used even by people that are, you know, in the 90 percentile. Because we want to keep our brains. One of the things, the biggest fear in the world today is not the fear of public speaking. The biggest fear people have is they're going to get old and they're going to be a burden to their children and they're not going to remember their past. You know, used to be, especially in ancient cultures like the American Indians in our country, they would place all of the history of the tribe with the elders. They didn't give it to the young people that had the good brains. They gave it to the elders who had the good brains. What's happened over time is our good brains have become atrophied from lack of use and you know, basically the lack of knowledge. One of the things that we found is that grounding, if you walk barefoot on the ground, it actually takes all this EMF you're seeing in the world. We can measure your body collects that energy, but if you're standing on the ground barefoot, it doesn't affect you at all. But if you're wearing shoes like we usually wear inside or something like that, then we're actually like antennas collecting that. So there's just little things that we used to do, you know, 100, 200, 300,000 years ago that would protect us today if we just started doing them again. Of course, we can't do it all the time, but we can do it occasionally just to bring that therapeutic dose back. I want to talk a little bit about the brain and brain waves. Now, for the young people in the room, this might not be the case, but if you're 28 or older, what we find is that most people are operating in delta. I'm going to explain what each of these brain waves are and how we evaluate them. Delta is the brainwave most people associate with sleep. That's really great. That should be a sleeping brain. That's awake brain. That's somebody who's awake. And we did a 3-minute time slice, 3 to 5 minute time slice of their brain, and this is the percentage of brainwave activity. What we found with over 10,000 brain scans is that the average person out there that we've scanned has over 50% of their brain in delta while they're awake. What that means is two things. One, they either have a lot of inflammation, which most of you in physiology should know is probably one of the main reasons people are seeing you. The body's getting burned out because of inflammation. So the brain is saying, hey, you've got inflammation. Let's chill out. Let's reboot. Let's take a nap. Let's sleep. But the problem is when they go to sleep, their brain flips on and they're not sleeping because they're not modulating. This neuroregulation isn't happening. So we need to turn that off. Theta, we call that the inventive mind. Every great inventor you ever read about, from Edison to Tesla to anybody who has insights, this is also where people in deep meditation go and healers go. And what we find is that theta, most adults don't have enough theta. Their theta is atrophied because of lack of use. That's why they can't sleep. Think of your brain, too, as an analog system, like a second hand on a clock. It's not a digital clock. And the reason I say that is alpha has to do with, alpha is really important. We call that the intuitive mind. What we mean by that is when you walked into this room, you said, boy, we're going to hear a lecture by Dr. Porter. And you have to bring up preconceived ideas. If you Googled me or you looked at some YouTube videos or whatever, then you knew a little bit about me. But if not, you're going, who's this guy? You might even think that I don't have hair, right? Some of you might be perceiving that. So all these things happen because we walk in and we preconceive things. It's natural to prejudge. That happens because of alpha, and it also trains us to adapt, improvise, and overcome in any situation. If you don't have alpha, we find you become autistic. All the autistic kids that we've worked on over the years, and we have really good results with training alpha for autistic kids, nonverbal kids become verbal in less than 3 weeks typically. Because alpha has a lot to do with your verbal ability. And there's no other way that we know of besides like magnetic resonant therapy, or cranial electrical stimulation. Those work, but there's a difference. There's 3 reasons why people have problems with their body. Thoughts, traumas, or toxins. So when you think about it, it could be their thinking that's causing it. They call those psychosomatic illnesses, which are when you can't explain what's going on to them. You say, hey, it's in your mind. The reality is some people will tell you everything's in their mind. So some part of it is there. Could be a trauma. They could have been in an accident. Of course, that's going to be important. But the most important thing that's happening right now, people aren't dealing with, is toxins. What is the interference we have? From electronic smog to it's just smog. If you're in Delhi, we were just there, and I come from a really small town. I intentionally moved from San Francisco to a small town in North Carolina in the States. And if we have to, we might have as many people as you have on the road here in 2 minutes in our whole town. We don't. It's a very small town. We don't have pollution. We're right by the ocean. We get the ocean waves, and we did that on purpose because we want to be healthy. And I can do it now because I've lived in the city for, all the other time. But alpha is very important. If people don't have alpha too, as adults, they won't sleep. Because you need alpha. You need to move through these different brainwave patterns to get into delta. And when you sleep, you go through a cyclic pattern. And I'm going to explain that in just a minute, why you need that. Beta is overproducing right now for most people. That means they're overreacting. Their nervous system is basically on fire. Any little thing. We do a lot with what's called primitive reflexes. Some of you might know what those are. In releasing those primitive reflexes, if somebody is born cesarean, there's a good chance that their primitive reflexes didn't get released. So a lot of our doctors will do some primitive research work to get their body functioning right, because we need that challenge, that thrive response when they're being born. But of course, we've got to protect the mother. So there's different things that we do there. But you can retrain it. Gamma is a brainwave associated with high-level creativity. Also, if you've ever known a healer, somebody that their hands get really warm and they heal people, some of you might be healers and you don't even realize it. You just walk in the room and you start changing people. That's why you chose to be a medical doctor. And there's a lot of science out there that shows that you showing up with the intent to heal is even more important than the medicines you give. So your energy field, in other words, who you are, and that energy field happens because your heart, you have a field of energy that extends out about 18 feet now. We can actually measure your heart rate from 18 feet away. One of the groups, you might not know who this is, but Dr. Oz is a big TV personality in America, and we do a lot of work with his group. And we brought in these cameras that this company designed for babies, and you can actually get the heart rate from over 18 feet away in the dark, and you can see it beating. So then you can help with the infant, the crib deaths and things like that. But they started using them also in assisted living facilities, because when the people would get out of bed in the middle of the night, fall down, break a hip or whatever, they could do it in the dark because you could do it through the heart. This is all based on science. So then we said, well, why can't we take that and we can actually be measuring their vitals? Because they've done this with the cosmonauts in Russia for years. Let's start using it for our own health. And that's what you're going to learn in the afternoon session, so I'm not going to spend too much time here, but I'm going to show you that. Now, this is before a brain tap session, before using light, sound, and vibration. This is the same person after. Okay? This is a perfect brainwave. This will not last. Okay? Just so you understand. This is like they had the experience. It was great. Now, within 72 hours, it'll return back to where it was over here if they don't do something to interrupt the pattern again. So think of it like we have to interrupt the program. Our body has a program. What I mean by that, does anybody here know how a doorknob opens? How to open a doorknob? See how he did this? Stand up and show him what you just did. He just did this, right? So I asked him, but his body showed me. That means his physiology is telling his psychology what it is. And that happens all the time. So his body knows, right? So what we have to do is start interrupting the body knowledge. Because some people might wake up feeling really good in the morning and they go, oh, I feel good now, but I can't wait. What's going to happen later? There are people that wake up like that, right? I feel too good. Something bad's going to happen today. I mean, people think like that. So we need to change their thinking. So they go, hey, something wonderful is going to happen today. And then they start predicting that. And then they'll see something wonderful will happen. So this brain, by the way, this person will have all the energy they want all day long. They can have chai if they want at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but they don't need it. You know what I mean? They don't even need coffee in the morning or whatever to get going, because this brain has energy. About 40 to 45% beta, 25 to 30% alpha. That's the energy waves. That's where you get your energy. If you've ever eaten food, you're feeling really down and didn't have much energy, but then you ate a meal and you go, oh, I feel so much better. But you just ate. You're physiology students, so you know nothing happened. There is no possible way that you took the energy and transferred it into usable energy by the body. That was all psychological energy. It was all this kind of energy. That's your real energy. Food is just light, sound, and vibration solidified that makes it easy for us not to use our brain. But you can get more energy this way by doing things with your brain. So this is the brain we want to develop. In our clinics, what we do is we measure them before, we have them go through different therapies, we measure them after, and then every 3 weeks we do another evaluation. We don't let them leave our clinical care until they're operating with this kind of brainwave. Now, some people will leave because that's just the nature of people. They'll start feeling a little bit better and they go, I don't need you anymore, whatever. So they'll go on, but our intent is to have people working with a perfect brain. This brain will look like that brain at night, because you want to be in deep delta at night, but you want to be awake when you're awake. This person will be throughout the day feeling like they're running with a parachute behind them. If you ever felt like it didn't matter what you did, you were just tired all day long, we could probably do a scan of your brain and you would have 50% or more in delta. Now, why can't your patient fix this on their own? First of all, the frontal lobes, which are responsible for all this, let's say they had a damage. And by the way, every person in the world, before you were 5 years old, you probably had at least 2,000 brain traumas. If you've had children, I have grandchildren now, and when I have little Eli or Sophie, I'm always worried because they hit every counter. They fall down in their head. And I know now, unfortunately, the brain is just jelly inside of a bowl. And when it slams the ground, it's going to get a bruise, just like you get a bruise on your leg. So who you are today actually is who you've become through the remodeling of your brain after being damaged. through those times. So we've actually found that once you start repairing these areas of the brain, depression goes away, anxiety goes away, because it's a physiological process, not just a psychological process. But they are linked, but there's a difference. So in the frontal lobes, that's the part of your brain that is actually generating beta waves. So that's why we think. We think up here. Now people ask us, why do we use flickering lights in the eyes? Well, the main reason is your eyes aren't just attached to your brain. Your eyes are brain matter. So if you've ever looked at somebody's eyes and said, wow, you have beautiful eyes, you're really telling them they have a beautiful brain, because that's brain matter. It's taking in information through this visual spectrum. If you've ever been, some people wonder why we have lights in the ears at the same time. Well, if you've ever been in a lecture and you couldn't see the lecturer, but then you moved your attention and then you finally could see line of sight with the lecturer, then you could hear them, that's because physiologically 30% of your hearing comes in through your eyes. It's part of our primitive reflexes. So that's why if you're behind somebody could be, if you're in a restaurant, let's say, and you're eating dinner, but then somebody says physiology, now you hear it, because we have this part of our brain called the reticular activating system that's always looking around the room, right, trying to figure out what's happening. Well, this light, sound, and vibration, the brain's trying to figure it out. Our brain loves patterns. So if we can create a pattern that creates a physiological state of healing, rest, and rejuvenation, that's what we're talking about. But if the frontal lobe goes to sleep, we don't get the benefit. That's why most people, when they meditate, they don't meditate right. In fact, I told Dr. Varun that he's one of the first people, I'm going to say the first person, that's ever beat the brain tap with himself. Because most people don't do that. They don't know how to meditate. They actually think meditation is sleeping. That's not what it is. It's an awakened mind state. It's not a sleeping state. And that means the frontal lobe stays active. But it doesn't stay active on, oh, my bills I have to pay, I have to go pick up so-and-so, I have to get this book read. You know, that's not meditating, right? But you can let those go. You got to let it, but you got to have it active. You want to, basically, if you can first evaluate your physiology while you're relaxed, that's going to be the biggest thing you can do. You become a silent observer, in other words. But you acknowledge your body. You don't. Meditation isn't not thinking. You can get to that state where you feel like you're in the no thinking zone, but it's kind of impossible not to think, you know, unless you've really practiced. When the parietal lobes have to do with GABA, now, right now in medical science, GABAnoids are one of the biggest things that are being researched right now. The reason is because if you look to the right of you, there's somebody sitting there, right? If you look to the left, there's another person. When you look to the right or left, if it's not one of them, then it's you that isn't sleeping well tonight. Because 1 in 3 people in the world aren't sleeping well. Okay? So and GABA is responsible for that. If you're not producing GABAnoids, this is what meditation does. It starts to produce GABAnoids because you're going to start to relax and get your brain working. Now, your brain doesn't produce those, remember. Your gut does. 95% of all neurotransmitters are made in the gut. So there's a connection between this brain-gut connection. And if we make it, and we have this brain-gut connection working correctly, then we're producing all of these neurotransmitters, and I'm only mentioning a few of them, all these different neurotransmitters, and it becomes like a bank account. And during the day, we use them. But if we don't produce them, then we have to rely on our adrenal system. And then if we don't have the way the body's designed to work, we'll burn out our adrenals. You know, adrenal fatigue, and our body system will burn out. Our body's designed to regulate these 3 systems, and again, this afternoon we'll go over a little bit more of that. The temporal lobes have to do with acetylcholine, and acetylcholine is when you're in love with somebody, you start to feel this acetylcholine effect. That's what alpha does. If you've ever done something you really enjoy, I'm not sure what it is, like cricket, or in America it'd be golf or baseball or basketball or football or whatever it is, or sewing, or, you know, going hiking, you know, doing those kind of things. When you're doing something you enjoy, you're producing vast numbers of this acetylcholine. Like your hobbies, in other words. If you have hobbies that you do, most people will spend all their extra time, all their extra money on their hobbies. It's all because they get a payoff of acetylcholine. Their brain pays them. Also, if you've ever known somebody that does a lot of volunteer work, that's of service to other people, they've now triggered that is acetylcholine effect too. That, yeah, they're helping other people, but they're getting a payoff. They're getting a physiological effect by helping people. And that becomes addictive. because you can dump about $15,000 to $20,000 worth of neurochemicals into your system by just going to a good movie and laughing, or being around your friends and playing a game, or getting into a deep meditation, whatever it is that you enjoy doing. And then we have the occipital lobes that have to do with delta. One of the biggest drugs out there, or the biggest drugs, are the SSRIs, right? These serotonin uptake inhibitors. Well, the problem is, remember, most people are hanging out in delta. Delta makes serotonin. The problem is the serotonin that people have in their brain is toxic. They have too much serotonin, not enough. If you really look at the lab results, it's not like they don't have enough. So it looks like on the surface it's kind of counterintuitive. They're stressed out, they're anxious. Oh, we need to calm them down. Let's give them more of this drug here that we need, the serotonin. No, they have too much. But our body's designed to use the serotonin today that you made today. You get serotonin tomorrow that you made tomorrow. But if you keep it in your system, you become addicted to that too, because the brain is very lazy. It does a lot of work, but it's always looking for shortcuts. So as soon as you put somebody on the medicines, it goes, oh, you're doing that for me. I don't have to do it anymore. In fact, when we work with our autistic kids, we work with doctors to do this, but as soon as we can get them off their medicine, we can get them results. If they're on their medicine, it's almost impossible to get their brain to change, because their brain gets patterned. The brain goes, oh, every day at 7 o'clock I'm going to get this pill. Every day at 4 o'clock I'm going to get this pill. And it starts to, remember, it loves patterns. And then when you disrupt that pattern, it says, hey, wait a minute. I was supposed to get that pill at 7 o'clock. And then they get angry and upset and nervous. This is an example of what we can do with light, sound, and vibration. This is the brain injury of somebody who played American football. They're bashing their heads against each other all the time. I played it now that, I don't know if I would now that I know what it does to the brain, but I played it when I was younger. That's the lesion in the brain up there. Then what we found was that these things, the reason that brain isn't getting repaired is the brain is really smart. It will isolate that damaged area and start to use all the other brain fibers around it, but it won't use that because there's toxins there, and so it's just going to isolate it, like quarantines it. But what we want to do is bring blood flow to that area and circulation. When there's blood flow and circulation, the body produces another thing called lymphatic vessels, right? The lymphatic system is what carries the toxins out. If there's no circulation and blood flow there, you can't get the toxins out. It'd be like trying to clean your room when it's all messy. You got to clean it up a little bit, then you can clean the room. You got to pick it up before you can clean it up. So what we found was that inflammation. So before it looked like that, 6 weeks it looked like that. These were done with SPECT scan technology. If you inject a dye into the bloodstream, then you can take a picture of the brain. And what we found was overall we got a 33% increase in blood flow to the areas of the brain within 6 weeks. And what happens with photobiomodulation through the skull, we can get it in through the ears. Right now, while you're sitting here, all the blood in your body is circulating through your body about every 45 seconds. But through your ears, it takes anywhere between 2 to 3 minutes. If you've ever cut your ear and tried to stop it from bleeding, it just keeps going because there's so much pressure built up in there. But it's the perfect place for us to give photobiomodulation. When that light hits there at a 633 frequency and a 470 nanometer frequency, by the way, those are the frequencies of the sunrise and sunset. And in your ancient text, actually it shows that if you go out in the morning between 4 and 6 or 2 hours before sunrise, you can't get burnt. The infrared spectrum is visible there. Your body actually tags the cells of your body and inoculates you against getting burned. So somehow your ancient writers knew about that and talked about it. Now we know infrared can heal the brain. But they also knew that if you did meditation, relaxation techniques out at that time of the day, you can heal your own brain. But you got to get up at 2 hours before sunrise to make that happen. So what we did is we found that if we could get that into the blood, the hemoglobin, naturally, everyone in this room is basically like a solar panel. When you walk outside, your body is absorbing light. Just to prove that to you in your physiology, just look into your physiology and when does your body make melatonin? Between 12 and 2 o'clock. If you're not in bed between 12 and 2 o'clock in deep sleep, you're not making melatonin. Melatonin's the brain cleaner. Then so you have to do supplementation or give somebody some pills of melatonin. But you can produce your own. So what we can do is we can trigger that kind of production by just putting light into the ears. The photons are absorbed by the hemoglobin, circulate through the body, then they find a part in the body that's going through apoptosis or cell death. That cell then attracts the photon, re-instructs the cell set of the cell, brings that cell back to life. At Harvard University, they shut down the study over 20 years ago, but they kept a chicken heart alive for over 30 years. They kept it alive, not attached to a chicken. They fed it nutrients, they detoxed it, and they gave it the perfect environment to thrive. They said we had to stop the experiment because those cells would live forever. So our cells aren't designed to cycle out. They just can't get rid of the toxins. They can't get the nutrients in. They can't get the perfect environment to live. So there's actually a report that shows that doctors today say if you die before 120 years old, you had a premature death. There are other studies that show we should live to be 270 years old. But there's no, I mean, we don't know right now, there's more centurions on the planet than any other time in history. So we're living longer because of course, medical science, but also because we know how to take care of ourselves better. You know, things like that. So we can change. Now this is happening in the brain, but the nice thing about photobiomodulation, it happens everywhere in the body. We actually have lasers that we use, and we do the acupuncture points with lasers. And we get really good results with different color lasers to open up the different meridians in the body. Now, when we talk about neuroplasticity, this is somebody named Rob Powell. He was one of our clients. This is a magazine called People Magazine. You might not have heard about it over here. It's a really big magazine in America. And they came out and did a feature on us. We had 108 weight loss clinics. And they asked us, do you have anybody in your program that's lost half their weight and kept it off for more than 5 years? My dad at one time was over 400 pounds, and my mother was 350. So we have the genes, of course, for being very large. But Rob has kept his weight off for now over 20 years. When they asked us for that, we could have sent them 1,000 names. We sent them 100. They used Rob. Because once you change your physiology and your psychology matches that, you don't go back to the old behaviors. So, but if you're thinking like an overweight person and you try to go on a diet, that's a disaster. Because nobody needs a diet. What you need is a healthy eating plan, right? You need to eat normally and sparingly. That's all part of changing your thinking, or what we call neuroplasticity. We're using retinal flashing. Remember those brainwave states? If we flash a light just off a little bit in the eyes, we have an algorithm that we use, this neurosensory algorithm, and it's mirroring light, whatever light we're flashing in the right eye. You'll hear the sound. I'm leaving a brain tap with you too, so they can practice with that. So you can actually experience it if you want. So yeah. So you can. One thing, when I describe this to people, some people say it's like describing atmosphere to a fish. You know, you got to experience it. So you'll set it up somewhere where the students can try it. And through closed eyelids, whatever's happening in the right eye is also happening in the left ear. Whatever's happening in the left eye is happening in the right ear. And it's balancing out the hemispheres of the brain. What happens there is when the brain starts to do that, it will start to create neurological connections. That's the neuromodulation we're talking about. It starts to create the synchronization that happens in the brain so that we can modulate the different frequencies of the body. These are also tuned to music. When we have special music, if we use music, light, and sound, we can activate different regions of the brain. And we know this now because we can use QEEG and actually do a live analysis while somebody's on it and say, oh, this region of the brain's lighting up, this region of the brain's lighting up. And we can, once you start lighting up those areas of the brain, blood flow has to go there because blood flow goes where attention directs it. So if your attention's there, the blood will flow into that area. And we also use positive psychology. We don't use any negative conditioning. If I asked everybody in this room to gather up all your willpower, you know, I'm going to ask you not to do something. Okay? I'm going to ask you not to think of a dancing pink elephant. What happens if I ask you not to think of it? Yeah, you start to think about it. So the brain doesn't know how to process a negative. It has to process everything in a positive way, so we use positive psychology. We also use guided imagery because in life we get what we rehearse, not what we intend. There's not a professional sport athlete that doesn't use some form of sports psychology. That means they visualize what they're going to do. If it's good enough for multi-million-dollar athletes, it's good enough for everyday people. So if you've ever been in a situation where you didn't know what to do or how to act, but you have similar situations and you could visualize it, you can get through it. But if you don't have any way to visualize completing that task, the brain basically freezes up. So we want to get the flow. It's all part of a flow process. This is a brain hack, we call it. In Scientific America in 2016, the May issue, the medical community finally came out and said that there's an actual cleaning system in the brain, but it only happens during level 4 sleep. So this internal plumbing system only happens when you're in these deep levels. So when you're going through these deep levels of sleep, if you don't reach deep level 4 sleep, how many people in here have like an Apple Watch or an Oura Ring or something that measures your sleep? Has anybody ever done that? Okay, well, it'll get here sometime. In America, like every other person has one. I have a ring. I can wear this ring and it'll tell me my sleep cycles every night. It'll tell me how deep I'm sleeping. As long as I get 1 hour of deep sleep, 2 hours of REM sleep, I score high on the sleep scale, and I have energy. If I don't get those cycles, it's not about staying in bed for 8 hours or 6 hours or whatever it is. It's about getting those deep levels of sleep. Now they know if you don't reach deep level 4 sleep, you never trigger these delta bursts, and you never trigger the cleaning system in the brain. So that means you get a toxic brain. And some people will say you get a leaky brain because those toxins have to come out somewhere. They show up as headaches, foggy brain, dementia, things of that nature. So it also helps you reset the circadian rhythm. Right? And that circadian rhythm is literally tied to the light from the sun. So that's why if somebody's flown across the continent or time zones, they get what they call jet lag. It's really light lag, because they flew across time zones and the light was different in the different places. So their body couldn't, our hormonal system is tuned to the light from the sun. So if we get that, we get activated. If you've ever woke up at night and you couldn't move, you had what they call sleep paralysis, you probably woke up in the middle of one of those cleaning cycles. That's how you know you're going through it. This is what we're going to show you tomorrow, but in a full, we'll do the whole demonstration. We can measure the nervous system here. So what we're showing here, this is the 3 different kind of modulating systems of the nervous system that makes up the autonomic nervous system, from the sympathetic system to the parasympathetic to the neurohormonal. And we'll bring somebody up and we'll do a demonstration. We'll do the reading. You can see it happening live. We'll set them in the audience. We'll have them come back up. It's a risk I take, but usually it turns out really good. So, and then we can give them the scan. The nice thing is that each of these shows, it can show them their brain waves, it can show them their metabolic rate, it can show them their neurohormonal system, it can show them their biological age, because we have the age that we were born and we go through time with, but also some people age faster. You know, you might know people that, wow, you look much older than your age, or you don't ever want to hear that, right? So those kind of things, and then it also shows coherency. Right now they know that heart rate variability is one of the best ways. They call it the gold standard for measuring health. So when you do that, certain things happen. And I have a few more slides and I'll open up for a few questions if we have time. This is, most of the people in America use, this is one of our soccer teams in America, the pro team called the Sports KC Players. They have a room where they set up 20 stations where they're using these pads, these compression pads, to pump the bad blood out of their body. But while they're doing it, they're doing brain tap at the same time. So this is part of their recovery. What we find when we're working with Olympic athletes or we're working with professional athletes, they overtrain. It's not that they undertrain. You know, they don't need to do more. They really need to do less to really get that recovery happening. So this is one of the groups we've worked with. So we have to, well, I'll leave it here So if you go to that, anybody here ever heard of a university called Duke University in America? It's a pretty popular medical school in America, and they're 1% owner of our company. What they do is they actually verify all of our data and make sure that when people do research that it's actually working for them. But all the students at Duke use our app. So when they start to get stressed, and this is free for you, you can go to this app and put in your information if you want to try it out for yourself, no cost. You'll also get one of my books. You can read it on your phone or if you have a iPhone or iPad, and you can learn a little bit more about it. Since we only had an hour here, you can download it there. So I'm open to any questions if you have any. Or did I tell you that the more intelligent people ask questions? I'll just wrap it up with this one story. We did a study with students and, yeah, oh, there you go. Yeah. You're going to see that this afternoon if you're in the class, but it takes about 3 to 5 minutes. We need a minimum of 250 heartbeats, but the system does 300. So it takes those 300 heartbeats, and then it does 100, then it does 100, then it does 100, and averages them. Between them, there's an RR frequency. That the frequency band between them is where they call it fractal mathematics. So they take that information, the frequency response, and that's where they get all this data from. The Russians, I didn't invent that. It's basically designed by the people who created heart rate variability. They're the ones that actually hold the patents on that. But it takes about 5 minutes to do that. And it's better to do it if you didn't just eat. Because when you've just eaten, it takes a lot of energy to digest food, so that skews the results. So if we have a new client coming into our centers, we would have them come in the morning before they ate to get a good reading. But we're going to get a reading this afternoon, whatever, and we'll see what happens pre and post. Okay. Thank you.